waiting for the temps. Cheers. They say that me dabbing on YouTube sets a bad example. It gives the anti-cannabis people something to point at. Um, but let me tell you something. If they're not going to point at me, they're going to point at somebody else or something else, because that's how they do. They want us to live in the closet the same as they do with gay people. They want us to all live in the closet. If we're not going to be like them, they don't want us out. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to express my grievances. Oh, I am sorry, I don't mean to hit the microphone. Um, highly on Virginia Normal. Um, you know what? I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna start right into it. And again, this I don't think really much of this is, except for some points we'll get to toward the end, or really anything new. Most of this stuff is going back 5, 6 years to like legalization. So let's start at the top. Let's just start right from the start. So when we legalized the medical program here in Virginia, uh, hey girl, come on up, come on up. They did things wrong. We'll just say that, and that's really kind of besides the point of what I'm about to talk about. But well, not completely. Whatever. Anyway, I'm just setting the stage because they only allowed 5 processors for the whole state. They made the cost of being a licensee, or whatever you would call it, um, so ridiculous. I think it was like, $1 million registration fee, or like, to fill out the application or something like that. It was so crazy expensive that only the, corporate people could, afford to get in the game at all. And again, there was only 5 processors, and the last I heard, 3 of those 4 processors, we'll get to the 5th in a little bit. Another grievance. But I think like 3 of those 4 are owned by the same company. So it's supposed to be a pentopoly, but it's really more of a biopoly. It might even just be a monopoly now, but that's not the grievance, though. That's not the grievance. The cost is ridiculous. The cost was ridiculous to get 4 grams of rosin for the entire month. I had added it up. $360 for 4 grams. That's $90 a gram of rosin. Uh, Plus, then, I wasn't expected to, but I always felt like I had to tip the driver because, my area still doesn't have a processor of its own. So these guys are coming all the way to the valley here. Well, at the time I was living in Harrisonburg from Richmond. That's, like a couple hours drive. And, so they drove all that way to deliver my medicine. I felt like I had to tip them. They didn't ask for it. Sometimes they told me, hey, you don't need to tip us. And I'd tip them anyway just because, I feel from my own heart and my own sense of morality like I need to. That I guess that's my poppy in me or something. I don't, or maybe my mom in me. I don't know. But, regardless, what we were told when they were legal or pushing through the bills and then, did vote yes on the bills for the medical program was that all of these processors were required to sign a commitment to agree to compassionate use programs that would provide heavy discounts for veterans and the disabled, and people, basically people on low income, people like me, or a fixed income, however you want to look at it. And none of those processors ever did anything of the sort. We are 6 years later now, 6 years after that vote, and nothing. The best that Greenleaf has ever offered. Well, I think that their rosin prices are like down from $90 to $80 a gram now. And, the best compassionate use discount that you get is like 10%. And that's not for being disabled or a veteran or anything like that. That's their stock that they need to get out of the door because it's about to pass the expiration date, which means that they can no longer legally sell it and they can't deliver it. So they need to get it out of the door. That's not a compassionate use program, obviously. That's just a sale. I know that, Virginia Normal has no authority or whatever to go and try to force these corporations to do what they agreed to do. However, nobody has done anything. Nothing. Week after week, live stream after live stream, year after year. Rarely is it even brought up. And when it is mentioned, it's like a footnote. Nobody is friggin' talking about it. Nobody is raising a stink about it. Nobody is trying to hold their feet to the fire. And again, I know that Virginia Normal can't, they have no authority, to really do anything about it forcefully. But what you can do, like we're going to mention with so many of these other things, sorry, I am, my autism is ticking away with my symmetry. I apologize. But, like with so many of the things that we're talking about here, what they can do, what they, do with other things every fucking Friday when they go live with Virginia Normal or whatever you want to call it, Jen, you don't talk about it. You can talk about it. You can fucking talk about it. You can fight the war in the court of public opinion, because in the court of public opinion is where voices get heard, voices get louder, and change. The important people start to hear those voices and that can actually make changes, that can actually hold somebody's feet to the fire, and I think the reason I'm putting this issue at the very front of this video is because I think that it is the most egregious in my grievances. I think I'm using the right word there, because there's no good fucking excuse for not talking about it. It is disgusting. It is gross that they will leave people out in the cold, the most vulnerable of us all. And, I don't need to continue to sit here because we got more stuff to go over. So I don't need to sit here and ramble, but I can't say it enough that, It's gross. It is unfair. And this is something that should be talked about instead of lecturing us on the word dabs. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? Lecturing us. I understand, even though you continue to use the word marijuana, I can understand not wanting people to use the word marijuana anymore because the word marijuana is tied to racism and, xenophobia in Mexican immigration. And so, that's totally understandable. But then you sit here and lecture us week on end for a while there about using the word dabs and telling us to use the word concentrates instead, except they're different things. Concentrates is a noun, whereas the term dabs is meant to be a verb or an adjective. We're going to just do a little dab. Just a dab will do you. That's where the term actually comes from. And then to say that we are dabbing, we're going to do some dabs, that's a verb. That is a method of consuming the concentrate, not the concentrate itself. Now, some people will go out on a slang tip and, use the word dabs as a noun to describe the concentrate. And really, if you want to get technical, you should, if anything, use the proper term for the concentrate that you're consuming, such as sugar or batter or resin or, wax, whatever. But the real point that I'm trying to make here is why? Who cares? Who cares about the word? Who fucking cares about the word? While the time that you were sitting there lecturing us about using the word dabs, it's time that you could be sitting here talking about the lack of compassionate use programs. The time you and other people from the old, which is why I stopped using it to begin with, the support group on Facebook for medical patients, sit there and lecture me about consuming on my own fucking YouTube channel, saying that I'm setting a bad example and, I'm giving the critics something to point at and say, see, except as I mentioned at the beginning when I did my dab, that, if they're not going to point at me, which they haven't because who cares? I'm a nobody. But regardless, they're going to point at somebody else or something else. They're always going to find something to fucking point at. That doesn't mean that I need to censor myself and that I should restrict my own freedoms. And then other people would come into, and this is the real reason that it really pissed me off so bad, was because then other people would come into that support group and post a quick little video of them taking a dab. The only real difference is that they're wearing a polo shirt and, they're not sitting here making jokes and, they're not having fun with it the way that I tend to have autistic fun with it. I'm neurodivergent, and I'm okay with that. You should be too. I'm just saying, though, they post their videos, and everybody's like, oh, well, you're so brave, congratulations. Good for you, buddy, And the time that I don't really even care that much because I'm used to people unfairly coming down on me for bullshit. But, again, the time that you're spending lecturing me is time that you could spend talking about the lack of compassionate use programs. Or how about tenant rights? Did we ever talk about that? No, we haven't. In all of the years I've been following Virginia Normal, which has been, for over a decade. I mean, to be fair, when we talk about tenant rights, obviously that wasn't a discussion until legalization, or that wasn't something that really could have been a discussion until legalization. But since we have legalized it, it's been 6 years now, it's never come up. Why? We talk about all of these arbitrary things like the word dabs and whether or not I'm consuming too much on my own YouTube channel and having a little bit of fun with my medicine. You know, Nobody's talking about tenant rights, where a landlord can just, oh, you smoke pot? Get out of here. I know people they've done that to. I know people that they've done that to. Before Prohibition and after Prohibition. People with medical, with medical certification. I was told straight up by a couple landlords, hey, we follow federal guidelines. If we find you with pot in your apartment, you're out of here. And there's nothing that I can do about it. I mean, I was prepared that if I ever get evicted from an apartment for smoking pot, I'm going to take it to court. There's nothing I can do. But unlike what you guys have not done about the compassionate use programs, I could go into court and raise a stink. I could make some noise about it if I get kicked out for smoking pot. For all the good that it does me. I haven't had an episode in like over 20 years since I've been consuming cannabis every day. Speaking of, I know to an extent, they have to tell us, don't go to the illicit market. Don't go to the illicit market. And it is true, that the stuff on the illicit market is unregulated, it's untested. Hell, I've bought things at certain markets and things that were just totally bunk. I bought a thing of a whole bag of edibles that didn't do a damn thing. And I'm not one of those people that edibles don't work on. Edibles definitely do work on me. And those same people, I bought a thing of moon rocks, and the moon rocks weren't totally bunk, but they weren't that good either. It was about like smoking mids back in the day. But I'm saying though, it's really hard to lecture people on going to the illicit market and then talking. See, that's the real problem is you don't just tell people, well, you should stay away from the illicit market. You talk down on them for doing it. And that's not okay. That's not okay. Because again, these processors have not opened up a single fucking compassionate use program. Not one of them have done it. And they're charging like $90 for a gram of rosin. They're charging like $100 for a quarter ounce of flour. They're charging, what was it? It was like 55 or 65, I can't remember which, for 1/2 gram of distillate carts. This is ridiculous. Nobody on a fixed income, hell, half of people out there working 2 jobs can't afford those prices. So it's when the market is fixed like that to alienate the people on my end of things, it's not fair and it's gross to talk down on us for going back to the illicit market because we can't afford the processors, and you're not talking about the lack of compassionate use programs that we were all promised. For all of that, my service area, Health Service Area 1, we were originally going to be the first processor to open in the state. It was going to be right in my hometown too. And Then the Board of Pharmacy decided to pull the license away from MedMen at the very last minute, depriving us of a processor in my area at all. And then every year promise, oh well, we're gonna pick a new processor in a couple months. And then a couple months come and nothing. And and I'd keep bringing it up for those first couple years, and then again I get talked down to by Jen, by other people in the support group for oh, you're overreacting. They haven't forgot about you guys over there. They're working on it. And then it all ends up in this big fucking court battle between MedMen and the Board of Pharmacy so that they can't select the processor, and it just getting caught up. We're, again, 6 years in from the vote and still nothing. And again, I understand Virginia Normal, they can't end the lawsuit. They can't force the Board of Pharmacy to pick a new licensee or anything. But again, you can talk about it, and I know some people will probably say, well, we can talk about it, sure, but what's that really going to change? By getting more people to talk about it, you increase the likelihood of the right people listening who can at least fight it and maybe not force a change, but work toward a change or help figure something out, take it to the media. These things tend to change a lot quicker when they enter the realm of public opinion. The court of public opinion is, not a thing to ignore. There is real power in the court of public opinion, and that is goddamn well something that should be being utilized for this. Again, just like the lack of compassionate use programs, the lack of a processor for an entire health service area, as it's being called here, it's gross. As far as using the illicit market and, before and after prohibition, I'm going to do what I have to do to take care of myself. And if that means breaking the law, maybe even taking a risk with unregulated products, that's what I'm going to do. Because I can't afford $400 a month for 4 grams of rosin that's going to end up running out before the month ends. Where I am currently getting my medicine, I am paying now granted I am getting sugar, sometimes batter, instead of rosin, which is, a little bit of a downgrade. But, I am getting an ounce for $100 now. An ounce for $100 versus $90 for 1 single gram of rosin. You see the difference there? I don't have to go back to re-up my medicine, but every 3 or 4 months now. So all of that being said, first, let me say that, communication is not my strong suit. I am neurodivergent. When I talk about being autistic, that's not a joke. I am legitimately autistic. High-functioning autistic, but autistic all the same. Just to put that out there. But also, I do want to take a moment to recognize, as I talked about in the vlog that we just filmed too, that we would not be where we're at today now if it wasn't for Virginia Normal. Virginia Normal has done a lot of good work and we would not have made it this far without them. And going forward, we still need Virginia normal, and we're still on the same side. We're still on the same side. I don't want any of us to lose sight over that. But sometimes you have to speak truth to power, and understand that we're still on the same side. But I'd be remiss to not express my grievances after all these years, because in my mind, these grievances are real, and serious. We can do better. We can do so much better. And with that being said, going forward, because, the assembly finally, the Democrats control. Let me backtrack a little bit. If you haven't watched my previous videos where I talk about this, or you don't know this bit of history, not to be picking a political side or whatever with this. But every single year, the Republicans control one of the two houses or the state house. They kill every single cannabis bill, either by subcommittee or by veto if they hold the governor's mansion. So the only time we ever get anything advanced is when the Democrats control all three houses. And we just happen to be in one of those sessions right now. And that is the great big expectation, is that the House and the Senate is going to vote for and pass another retail bill so that our retail market can open up to Virginia, and Governor Spanberger will, she has claimed that she will anyway, and I definitely believe her, have no reason not to, that she's going to actually sign it, unlike Trumpkin. So that being said, normal, please, 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 please. I'm going to cry thinking about it, because the only way we ever get anything happening is through the Democrats. And then the Democrats end up dropping the fucking ball and fucking things up tremendously. They do so much better than the Republicans, but they still fuck it up. Look at the way they kicked, retail down the road with reconciliation, or the way they limited the processors to 5 processors and made it so expensive to get in the game that most of us now are driven right back to the illicit market. The silver lining in that is that at least it's easier to find on the illicit market, way easier to find on the illicit market now, and it's way cheaper, and you don't have to worry about getting busted with it now, as long as they don't see you paying so and so for the product, then whatever, if you've got less than an ounce, they're not even going to fine you. You're going to just walk home with it, or drive home with it, whatever. If you've got more than an ounce, it's going to be a $25 fine. So, we're still so much better than we were. It's just, we can do better, and we have to do better. But, with looking forward to the retail market, please, for the love of God, don't fight against all of these high taxes on it. And, raising the cost of entry. I've heard talk about that already. And, we need this vertical integration. We need a model like Oklahoma has for its medical market, because, I've got a buddy of mine over in Oklahoma, and hey, dude, you know who you are. But you know, it's so much cheaper because there's so much competition. Everybody's always putting on sales and trying to get their product out of the door. He sent me a link to the menu for one of his favorite dispensaries, and I couldn't, my jaw was on the floor because, you could get a gram of some of their, like, kind of mid tier stuff for like 40 cents, 40 cents for a gram nug, you know, for a gram nug of their like preemie preem, it'd be like $5, you know. That is so much better. And you get, an ounce of rosin for not much over $100. I mean, and plus he's getting, deals like all the fucking time that, ends up making things even cheaper. And, it's just insane. That's the model that we need here. Let whoever get into the game. I mean, there should be regulation on it. There has to be regulation on it. We need to keep the third party testing and all of that good stuff. I'm totally on board for all of that. But also, if you want to keep us off of the illicit market, instead of talking down on us for using it, we need to make sure that the retail market doesn't overtax us and doesn't overtax the entrepreneurs trying to get into the game. Again, I just want to reiterate that this is not my attempt. Like anybody, hardly anybody watches my channel anyway. But, this is not my attempt at a hit piece or, anything like that. This is just me expressing my grievances and, my thoughts on where we've been and where we're headed. And again, we're on the same side. And to that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, and cheers. Here in once it comes to temp. Cheers. Sometimes you wanna smoke and nobody knows your name. Do, 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 do. 'Cause we're always dab the same. See? That's what I'm saying. Jokes. Nothing wrong with taking dabs and telling jokes. And I will fucking die on that hill. And it'll be a Silent Hill revelation in 3D. There's somebody. They're out there stalking on me in my balconies, on my balcony. Oh, that was funny in me. Not really. Jew. I did the "bew" at the wrong place. Yeah, so I guess we'll cut it right there. I think I've said pretty much everything that I need to say. So thank you all for hanging out and listening to what I got to say. I appreciate you all. I love you, and I will see you in the next one, babies. Bye, bye, bye. Love you, little dudes. Love you. You my little dudes, little dudes.